Hey, what up folks? It's Alex. I hope you're all good. Last week we covered the project manager in Davinci Resolve. Today we're talking frame rates, resolutions, timelines, and project settings. Welcome everyone to 5 Minute Friday, brought to you by our good friends at Audio. You can get your first year of music and sound effects for just $59 using the link down below. So, what exactly are the project settings? Simply put, the project settings are the default parameters for your timelines that are saved within any given project. Things like, of course, resolution and frame rate. But they are just that. They are just defaults. They're not actually set in stone. You can still create timelines with different resolutions and frame rates within the project. Stick with me. We'll come back to that in a second. However, while they're not set in stone exactly, it is still important that you check them whenever you start a new project. So here we are with a brand new project open. And the first thing you should do, click on the little cog or gear in the bottom right hand corner to open up your project settings. Now there is a ton of stuff in here we could go into, but if you're only getting started in Davinci Resolve and you're just trying to do some YouTube stuff or whatever, you're not really concerned about color management or super duper optimization or anything like that, you don't really need to spend too much time in here. You only need to stick with the two basics, resolution, frame rate. And both of those are located within this master settings, and they're right at the top. You've got your timeline format. So the first one, timeline resolution. It's a real simple drop down box, and there's basically every resolution you could ever need within there. But if you do need anything else, you can set custom, and then you can simply enter whatever you want into these boxes. Quick note, those of you that are on the free version are limited to a maximum of 3840 by 2160, aka Ultra HD. But other than that, you can pretty much put whatever resolution you like in there. Back to the screen. Boop. There's also an option here for use vertical resolution, and that will essentially just swap these numbers around. So let's change it to something sensible like 1080p. We give this box a click, and then it turns it into a vertical format. Easy peasy. Now this option, the timeline resolution, is totally flexible. You can actually jump back into your project settings at any point within any edit. You can always jump into your project settings and you can change this at any time. Underneath there, we have timeline frame rate. So same thing again, we have a simple drop down box and you've got pretty much any option that you're realistically going to need. Again, quick note, you free users, you are limited to using just 60 frames per second. That's the highest option that you have. But realistically, if you're delivering online, you're never going to need anything higher than that. Anyway, you're more than likely going to need 23.976 or 24, 25, 30, 50 or 60 frames per second, depending on where you're from, what you've shot with, and where you're looking to deliver your project. So I'm just going to set this, for this example, to 30 frames per second. The playback frame rate, you don't need to amend this. This will just pull down from your timeline frame rate by default, so you can leave that be. Video monitoring, you can leave this alone. This is specifically if you're using an SDI output, and there's some other stuff which, generally speaking, you can leave well alone for now. Once that's set, simply hit save. Awesome. So what did that actually do? Well, all you've done there is set defaults for any timelines that you create. So if you create a new timeline, that are the settings that it's automatically going to pull through. Let me show you how that works. So here we are. I'm going to create a new timeline because this project currently doesn't have a timeline. There's a few different ways that you can create a timeline. Let me go to the edit page, actually, because this is the one you're probably more likely going to use. So we can either click on File at the top and go to New Timeline. There's the Control-N keyboard shortcut, or we can right-click within our media pool, timelines, create a new timeline. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. I'm just going to give that a click, and this Create New Timeline box is going to appear. We can change the time code, the start time code, if we want to. I'll leave that be. We can give this a name. I'm going to call this Default, and then we can amend the number of tracks. We can amend these later as well, but we can just set the starting number. Let's go with that. The audio track type. Once that's done, we simply hit create. Let's make my media pool a bit bigger. Now you can see we have this default timeline within there. We know it's a timeline because it's got this little logo over on the left hand side. Now I've actually changed my media pool view from thumb, which is this standard one, to this list view so we can see some additional information. You can see here we have resolution and FPS. So this is pulled through that 1080p 30, which we set within our project manager. So if I was to create another one, Let's just leave that as timeline 2. It's going to have exactly the same options. Now, if we were to jump into our project settings, you can see the timeline resolution is there. We can change that however we like. As mentioned, that one is flexible. But because we've now created a timeline within this project, we can no longer change our frame rate. I'll come back to how you actually get around that in the moment. But what I want to do, I'm going to change this resolution from 1080p to 4K and then click save. And these two timelines will automatically update. So these timelines are simply set to adopt whatever is set within the project settings. But there is an option to turn this off so that you can set them independently. So let's go with timeline 2. I'm going to right click on the timeline within the media pool. We're going to go to timelines and we're going to go to timeline settings. Now here you can see it's got 4K, Ultra HD, 30, but there's this little tick box at the bottom and it says use project settings. That's what's telling this timeline to pull the default from the project settings. If we untick that, all of these options become available to us and we can change them independently. So let's change this now to, let's just go 720p and we can change this to 24 frames and then click OK. So now we have our default 4K 30 and this timeline 2, 720p, 24. If we will go to our project settings, let's change this back to 1080p. Our default's going to change because this one is still connected to our project settings, but this timeline 2, as mentioned, is completely independent. We can set this to be whatever we want it to be. Now, the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that that tick box is available to you when you're creating a new timeline. So you don't need to create one and then go back and amend it every time. If you know you need a timeline with a different frame rate or resolution, you can just create a new one and untick the box. Got it? So that's the difference between the project settings and the timeline settings. They can be linked, but if you untick that box, you can unlink them and then you can just deal with them independently. Now, quick note, you saw that I went in and I changed that frames per second on that timeline too. It's really important to note that once you've added anything to that timeline, you then can no longer change the FPS, the frame rate. So what if you've already edited a timeline and then you realize it's at the wrong frame rate and you want to change that frame rate, but there's already media on it and all that sort of stuff? Well, it's actually really quite simple. So here we have this timeline, and as you can see, I've already got an edit on there. Now I've realized that I don't want it at 30 frames, I want it at 24 frames. Now there's actually two ways that you can do this. The first one, it's a bit of a hack. So what I recommend that you do before you do this method is right click on your timeline 1 and then go to duplicate timeline, just so then you have a backup. Now what we're going to do is highlight everything on the timeline. We can either click and drag or we can use Control and A to highlight everything. Then we're going to do a Control and X to cut everything, which essentially removes everything from the timeline. Then within the media pool, right click on timeline 1, go timelines, timeline settings. We can untick our use project settings. Because there's nothing on this timeline, we've got the frames per second option. Change this to be 23.976. Click on OK. Click on the timeline or just give the playhead a little wiggle to make sure it's selected. Then hit Control and V to paste and job done. We've now got rid of everything from this timeline, changed the frame rate, and then put everything back on. Now, as mentioned, that's kind of a sneaky way. What you can also do is simply go to create a new timeline, untick the project settings. Let's make this one something different. Let's say 25. Click create. So now you've got this timeline 3. Quick bonus tip, you can really quickly jump between timelines by clicking on this little drop down at the very top of the screen. Let's go to our timeline 1. Same thing again. Highlight everything with a Control A. This time we're just going to hit a Control C to copy. We'll then jump to our new one, timeline 3. Click within the timeline, paste with a Control V, and there we go. We've just copied everything from our 23.976 timeline over to our 25 FPS timeline, solving our issue. Bob's your uncle. Job done. Happy days. Hey! Hopefully that all makes sense. I know it probably seems a little bit long-winded, but I want you to understand exactly what the project settings do compared to the timeline settings. And once you understand exactly what's going on, it's really easy to manipulate it and just to get the timeline settings that you really want. So the last thing I want to show you is how to create presets. So these are the project setting presets, and it just means that you can save a little bit of time every single time you open a new project. So here we are back in DaVinci Resolve. Now this is best done in a completely empty project. So I've just got a brand new project here ready to go. We're going to click on our little gear or cog in the bottom right hand corner to open up our project settings. Then all we need to do is to set the resolution and frame rate to the ones that we commonly use. So let's say I quite often do 1080p 25. Just going to change them. Then we click these three little dots in the top right hand corner. And then we can go to save current settings as the default preset. The default preset simply means that every single time you open up DaVinci Resolve, every single time you create a brand new project, these are the settings that are going to load. So the project setting is going to be set to 1080p, and in my case, 25 frames per second. So it's just a super handy way of making sure they're the same every time, and they're the ones that you actually want them to be. It asks if I want to update the preset. I do. Click update. Now, if you quite often jump into a project that's maybe different to this, again, rather than having to amend it every single time, let's change this one to be Ultra HD. This is a 4K 25. We don't actually want this one to be the default, but we want it to be available to us really quickly. What we can simply do is save the current settings as preset. We'll call this one Ultra HD 25. Click on OK. And then if we click on the three little dots, we now have this Ultra HD 25, and we can load this preset in whenever we want. So let's just do another one. Let's do a 1080p vertical at 30, which is a pretty common setting for TikTok, Reels, whatever, that sort of thing. Then we're going to go to the three little dots, save current settings as preset, 1080 vert 30, OK. And then we click the three little dots once again, and we've got these different presets. Just saves you that little bit of additional time. And there you go. Project settings, understanding timelines and frame rates. Hopefully this was useful, not too waffly. Did I go into too much detail? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts down in the description below. Thanks ever so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Take it easy. See ya.